passed. Members' motion with no legislative effect. Mr. Kingsley Wong will move a motion on taking the lead by the government to review the outsourcing system. Two members will move amendments to the motion. This council will proceed to a joint debate on the motion and the amendments. Later, I will first call upon Mr. Kingsley Wong to speak and move the motion. Then I will call upon Dr. Frankie Ngan and Mr. Ambrose Lam to speak in sequence, but they may not move the amendments at this stage. The joint debate now begins. Members who wish to speak, please press the request to speak button. And now call upon Mr. Kingsley Wong to speak and move the motion. Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the motion as printed on the agenda be passed. This is a motion on taking the lead by the government to review the outsourcing system. The government has been outsourcing public services since the 1990s. After return to the motherland, the Hong Kong government further downsize the civil service establishment. At the moment, the situation is distorted. Labor rights are undermined. The government cannot save costs through outsourcing public services. Members of the public are not happy with the public services. Only the service contractor wins in the end. According to President Xi in the July 1st key speech, the Hong Kong SL government should be more courageous and adopt more efficient measures to overcome difficulties so that citizens in Hong Kong to share more fully and fairly in the fruits of the government, so that the public will believe that if you work hard, you can improve the life of your own and that of your family. The Hong Kong SL government has a primary responsibility of looking after the people of Hong Kong, and that is why a reform should be put in place on the outsourcing system to make sure that the grassroots workers will receive a reasonable income so that they have a sense of happiness. Now, for the outsourcing contracts, the amount now stands at $48.5 billion. The median hourly rate is just $55. 30% of the workers are earning less than $50. So after working for 6 hours a day for 26 days or 8 hours a day, they earn less than $10,000. Their working environment is poor. They do not have long enough meal breaks, and each service contract will only run for 3 years. Now, for a worker working for a contractor for 8 to 10 years, they don't get sufficient safeguards. According to the 2019 report, Director of Audit's report, 70% of the cleaners working for service contractors are not working in an environment with ventilation. 34% of workers did not have sufficient meal breaks. They did not have time even for meals. Now, the government is outsourcing the responsibility in the outsourced contracts. Very often, it would take a long time for workers to get compensated, together with labor costs, insurance costs. In annualized terms, it only accounts for 4.3%. According to the efficiency unit's study earlier, the total spending on outsourcing contracts could reach 14%. So the cost of outsourcing contracts may be higher than a direct employment of employees in the civil service. These posts in the contracts will only run for half a year or 1 year, and it is very difficult to acquire experience. For example, for property management service contracts, they are outsourced. Now, we also came across several instances of displaying the regional flag upside down. That is due to the inexperience of the outsourced workers. They are not equipped with the knowledge to handle emergencies, not to mention these workers getting underpaid. The public are not happy with the public services either. So it's a lose-lose situation for the workers, the government, as well as the public. The service contractor is the biggest winner. In 2022, one of the service contractors recorded a 1.8 billion contract amount. 85 of them came from government contracts, so they had earned a profit of $65 million. This is a profitable business with little risk entailed. Of course, if you're a businessman, you your concern is on profit, but the government should also ensure the proper use of public money. Now, the FTU advocates a review of the outsourcing system. There should be an undertaking so that outsourced workers will not overtake jobs for civil servants. Living wage should be put in place. Now, in fact, publicly funded municipal service is not something new. We have public organizations such as the Airport Authority. In other countries, there are also similar arrangements. In the UK, with a drop in the quality of public services between 2016 to 2018, 266 services were turned public, and 77% of services in the UK became government-owned. At one point in another country, the services were outsourced, leading to different unscrupulous practices, such as suppressing workers' wages. After 2014, in Guangzhou, the outsourced services came to an end. The privatization rate dropped to just 35% from 65% before. Many outsourced workers then became government workers. Government is the biggest employer in Hong Kong. It also carries the primary responsibility to safeguard labor rights for grassroots so that they can get reasonable return for the hard labor. A reform is needed to instill a sense of gain and a sense of happiness for our workers. I so submit. I urge members to support the motion. I now put the question to you that Mr. Kingsley Wong's motion be passed. Mr. NGAN.
President, the DAB agrees that the government should review the operation of outsourcing system from time to time so that outsourcing service is competitive in terms of price and can provide quality services to the public. And that the government could also then focus its resources on essential work that needs to be taken up by the government. Now, coming back to the motion today. Now, okay, the government may outsource services, but then it can't outsource its own duty as the employer of the services. So as the employer, the government needs to consider, look after the pay and remuneration and occupational safety and health of workers. That's why DAB supports the motion that the government should take the lead in reviewing the outsourcing system. Then how that if the government is going to take the lead, then the review must be comprehensive with a wider scope. Now, the original motion only proposes to turning posts with actual needs into permanent posts, and so that's only one-sided review. We understand that after review, there is regular review for the government to turn posts with actual needs to permanent posts, but usually, of course, the arrangement only applies to the conversion of a non-civil service contract post to permanent posts. As for outsourced posts being turned into permanent posts, it's true, we rarely see that. But then if there are actual needs in real circumstances, we should consider it. That's why we have proposed amendments to the motion. Now, turning outsourced posts to permanent posts actually means narrowing the scope of outsourced services. Now, there are tens of thousands of outsourced posts now. There are 4 major procurement departments that provide over 40,000 posts. So how much can we narrow down the scale of outsourcing? We believe that in the near to medium term, it's not possible to turn too many of these posts into permanent posts. So apart from turning the outsourced posts to permanent posts, the review should also cover the assessment criteria for awarding contracts, strengthening the regulation and monitoring of outsourced service contracts to further protect the legitimate rights and benefits of outsourced workers. Now, for example, in previous rounds of review, after the review, the pay level, the contract period, and occupational safety and health protection have seen improvements. But more importantly, we need an effective monitoring mechanism to make sure that all the contract terms are actually implemented. For example, in a contract, it's stated clearly that the contractor must comply with the employment ordinance and the contract terms. If there's any violation, there may be penalty points or even termination of contract. But then, say in the service contract, there may be provision that the employer must implement the guidelines on heat stress, or management of heat stress. But then, where many find that an employees never told workers about such arrangements on heat stroke prevention, they don't even inform their staff when there's a heat stress alert. So. And then at the time of tendering, employers may hire rehabilitated persons, so they will have additional scores. But then after the contract is awarded, such rehabilitated offenders may be dismissed, and the government doesn't take follow-up action. Now, the government needs to step up monitoring. If they see serious problems, they should resolutely terminate contracts to serve as a warning to others. Finally, we see that there is decreasing competition in tendering. Only a few companies submit tenders. Now, the outsourcing contract is meant to enhance quality and lower costs by introducing more competition, but it doesn't seem to be working that way. So that's why there is now final management of management contracts, and then very often there are large companies monopolizing the tender. So when the government reviews the scheme, it should consider very carefully the assessment criteria of awarding contracts, so that there won't be decrease in competition. Thank you, Mr. Ambrose Lam. Thank you, Deputy President. My amendment is to add that when outsourcing, priority should be given to local enterprises which employ local workers and local professionals. Now, these enterprises could be foreign funded, they could be locally funded. The purpose is to improve the standard of living and the competitiveness of local workers and professionals. More importantly, it is to give protection to their legitimate rights for development. Now, I must stress that we're not asking the government to change the GATT requirements, but rather, when outsourcing contract, the government needs to make sure it's fair. The process is fair and open, so that local workers' interests are not undermined. We welcome foreign businesses coming to Hong Kong to set up companies and bidding in government's projects. But then, but we want local workers to have more opportunities to exchange experience and learn from their foreign counterparts. Now, a year ago, I asked an oral question on a similar issue, and the government said at the time that because Hong Kong is a signatory to the GATT of the World Trade Organization, we need to make sure that overseas and local suppliers are able to compete on equal footing. So there must be equal treatment for both local supplies and overseas supplies. Otherwise, there is a chance that complaints will be lodged. But then there are countries that have signed GATT, but when they award contracts, they include clauses protecting local workers. So there are ways to deal with that GATT requirement. Of course, Singapore tenders will award 30% of points to 30% of scores to employment of local workers. And then the UK may state in outsourcing contract there must not be discrimination against workers of other nationalities. But then there's also a requirement for the outsourced company to inform labor unions of their policy. So local labor unions, of course, will not support these outsourcing companies to hire non-local workers. The labor unions in the UK have big say. If they're not happy, they will organize a strike. So that's why the government is resorting to labor unions to ensure the protection for local workers. Now, in Hong Kong, we don't see similar provisions in outsourced contracts. And I receive many complaints that is, the government is inclined to award contracts to foreign-funded companies. So I must ask the government to consider ways to protect the legitimate interests of local workers. Now, of course, we must not go against the NGAN requirements, but then in our outsourcing arrangement, we could learn from the experience of other countries to include provisions to protect quality and the legitimate interests of local workers. Now, I must stress again, I'm not against importation of labor. I'm just saying that through outsourcing, we would offer more opportunities to local workers and professionals, and then they could also learn from their overseas counterparts, and they would enhance their competitiveness. So I speak in support of Mr. Kingsley Wong's original motion and Dr. Frankie Yan's amendment. Thank you.
Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury. I thank Mr. Kingsley Wong for proposing this motion and Mr. Ambrose Lam and Mr. Frankie Yan for their amendments. They allow the government to listen to members' views and give our responses on this topic. First, regarding Mr. Kingsley Wong's motion, which proposes to review the outsourcing arrangement by converting positions with actual needs to permanent appointments. We'd like to make it clear that outsourcing is only one of the ways of providing public services. Individual departments may, having regard to factors such as their operational needs, service nature, and effectiveness, decide whether to provide public services through employing civil servants, engaging non-civil service contract staff, or outsourcing. As public funds are involved, regardless of the mode of service delivery, departments need to ensure that public resources are properly utilized. Engaging the private sector in the delivery of public services helps the government maintain a lean and efficient civil service establishment. To ensure public finance sustainability, the government has, since year 2021 and 22, maintained zero growth in the civil service establishment for 2 consecutive years, and will continue to strictly control the growth of the civil service establishment. While the proper use of outsourced services can help the government maintain zero growth of the civil service establishment, it can also allow us to respond flexibly to people's need for public services, as well as facilitate the creation of jobs and business opportunities in the private sector. If a department decides to outsource its services, it has to, in accordance with the government's procurement procedures, procure the services concerned in a clear, open, fair, and competitive manner. As Mr. An said, we follow such system. I understand the concerns of Mr. Wong and Mr. An about the remuneration packages of outsourced workers and the monitoring of outsourced service contracts. The government attaches great importance to these issues too. For this reason, the government has, regarding the remuneration packages of non-skilled workers employed under government service contracts and the relevant monitoring work, conducted several reviews in recent years. We have implemented a series of measures since April 2019 and rolled out further improvement measures this May. For instance, the government has increased the weighting of technical assessment of the marking scheme and stipulated that the weighting of workers' wage level should not be lower than 25% in the technical assessment. With the implementation of this measure from April 2019 to September 2022, the median committed hourly wage of non-skilled staff increased cumulatively by about 50%, higher than the market rate and minimum wage by 19% and 37.5% respectively, showing that government outsourced non-skilled workers are given effective protection concerning their remuneration. Also, non-skilled staff are entitled to a contract gratuity equivalent to 6% of their total wages. Since this May, this entitlement has been extended to new contracts for supervisors of non-skilled staff. Moreover, under the enhancement measures, non-skilled staff who have been continuously employed for 1 month are entitled to statutory holiday pay earlier than that provided for under the Employment Ordinance. Starting from this May, we have required tenderers to submit a heat stroke prevention work plan to enhance the occupational safety and health of our staff. Regarding the monitoring of government service contracts, as mentioned by the members, we reckon the importance of ensuring that contractors are able to deliver public services effectively and that the labor rights of non-skilled workers are properly protected. In this connection, since this May, we have enhanced the framework for monitoring contractors. by introducing a standardized approach for government departments. For example, procuring departments are required to designate staff with appropriate professional expertise to monitor contracts and services. Procuring departments are required to conduct on-site and surprise inspections and hold work meetings with contractors. Also, departments are required to take the initiative to reach out to non-skilled workers to inform them of their rights. The procuring departments are also required to report annually to the controlling officer on their monitoring work. To protect the non-skilled workers engaged by government service contractors, the government makes it mandatory for contractors to sign standard employment contracts with their non-skilled staff and set out clearly the employment package for the employees, such as monthly wages, working hours, paid rest days, etc. The purpose is to provide a clear and uniform framework for both parties. The procuring departments will check if the contractors comply with the relevant legislations and contract terms. In case of persistent poor performance or breach of contract terms by the contractors, the procuring departments will take follow-up actions, including issuing default notices to the contractors under the demerit point system in respect of each contractual obligation breached by the contractors or even terminating their service contracts. In addition, if a contractor is suspected to have breached labor legislations, the procuring department will refer the case to the relevant enforcement agency or the labor department for follow-up actions. To strengthen the marking scheme and to achieve a deterrent effect, contractors who have in the past breached the relevant legislations protecting labor rights and remuneration of employees or contractual obligations may be barred from bidding non-skilled worker contracts or have their points deducted during the assessment process when bidding for new contracts in future, thus reducing their chances of winning the contracts. In respect of monitoring work, take the Food and Environmental Hygiene Department or FEHD as an example. The Central Investigation Team of FEHD, which comprises staff of the Health Inspector grade, has conducted more than 2,000 inspections and surprise checks in the past 3 years and met with the non-skilled workers for more than 500 times. From 2021 to this September, the Labour Department has conducted nearly 2,700 workplace inspections in respect of government contractors and interviewed about 9,000 employees of government contractors individually to ensure that the employment rights of contractors' employees are protected. As regards Mr. Ambrose Lam's amendment, which proposes that priority be given to local enterprises employing local workers and local professionals when outsourcing, I'd like to point out that the government's procurement policy is to, through fair, open and competitive procedures, encourage participation as we procure the necessary goods and services. Hong Kong is a signatory to the Agreement on Government Procurement of the World Trade Organization, and we have to ensure open and fair competition amongst local and non-local contractors. As regards giving priority to local labor and local professionals, procuring departments may, subject to the principles of the above procurement policy, formulate their own tender specifications and procurement contracts according to their needs. The government attaches great importance to protecting the remuneration and legitimate rights and benefits of outsourced non-skilled workers as well as the monitoring of contractors. I will carefully listen to members' views and suggestions and give a consolidated response in my concluding remarks. Thank you, President.
陳紹雄議員。
Mr. Chen Xiu-hong. Thank Deputy President. I would like to thank Mr. Kingsley Wong for moving the motion on taking the lead by the government to review the outsourcing and the amendments of the two amendments. The government provides certain public services through outsourcing is becoming more popular. It wants a cost-effective way to provide quality services to the public and to ensure the flexibility of the government structure. It's also to make good use of market resources and provide job opportunities in the private market. It helps to stimulate the economy as a whole. That is the policy objective. Now, in the private market, there's been the outsourcing system for a long time. It's been working well, but when many criticize that there's always the lowest bids win arrangement, and then contractors want to win the bids and they want to maximize their profits, so they suppress their staff structure and welfare and terms of condition for their staff, and at the end, workers suffer. So this is regrettable. And then our government is the ultimate employer. It has the duty to protect the interests and rights of workers. In the election manifesto of the chief executive, Mr. John Lee, he promised to review the outsourcing arrangement and improve the treatment of outsourced workers. Now there have been measures announced this year. For example, to increase the weighting of staff benefits in the handling arrangement, and also to state entitlement of gratuity payment of 6% upon termination of contract and so on. But then the government's not doing a proper job in monitoring the implementation of the contract, and so that's why the systems become stigmatized. Now, the chief executive has said before that with an outsourcing system, what is most important is the monitoring mechanism. But then from 2020 to 2022, the 4 major procurement departments, the LCSD, Housing Department, FHD, and Government Property Agency, we can look at data of monitoring. Now, the LCSD has not set up a central monitoring team. The Housing Department and the FHD carry very few inspections. In 2 years, they found no problematic cases or no irregularities. So it seems that the monitoring mechanism is there for nothing. And now the government needs to review whether the monitoring mechanism is effective. It has to step up monitoring of the performance of contractors. There must be more inspections and surprise inspections. They have to make sure that contractors are fully complying with the contract conditions. They must stringently implement the penalty deductions, the penalty point system, and so on. And they must even terminate contracts too if there are serious problems. This is to serve a deterrent effect. Now, I agree that in the procurement conditions, there should be provisions to protect workers, like improving their pay and condition of service. There should be higher weighting for such elements. This is to encourage contractors to provide better arrangement for their workers. Now, in Mr. Kingsley Wong's motion, he proposes to convert posts with actual needs to permanent posts, but I have reservation about that. If in the market there are services that are provided in a more efficient and cost-effective manner than that by the government, then we may not need permanent posts in the government. So that's why Dr. Frankie Ann has added amendments to make it more flexible. So the government is taking the lead has to take the lead to protect the interests of workers. It should ensure that public funds are used properly so that we can make sure the outsourcing system is working well. Thank you.
Mr. Sunny Tan. Thank you, Deputy President. I thank Mr. Kingsley Wong for his motion. We need a review and we need a monitoring of the outsourcing system. Pre-1997, there was the outsourcing system. Electrical research suggests the research came out in 2017. The outsourcing system back then was rolled out for economic efficiency and service quality. The outsourcing system is not unique to Hong Kong. In the mainland, in 2013, there was a decision on government procurement. Since then, across the mainland, the government outsourced different kinds of services through procurement. There were 2 major issues with Hong Kong's outsourcing system. First, poor work conditions, lack of gear, lack of labor protection. And second, the public is not happy about the services that came through procurement. 2 years ago, we heard about cleaners having to take their meals within a toilet. That led to a major reaction. Media reports found out that the contractor failed to find a proper place for the cleaners to take their meal. So the cleaners had to take their meals in the toilet. And then there was a survey suggesting over 70% of the FEHD's contractors fail to find a proper place for cleaners to take their meals. The problem rests with the contractors. The government needs to monitor the contractors' work. In the 2022 policy address, the CE proposed reviewing the hiring of outsourced contract workers. That includes the pay, the conditions, and this also has to do with the monitoring. The Ombudsman pointed out that the existing monitoring of the outsourcing system, that is the demerit system, comes with a flaw. It's only when certain labor rights are undermined and then the demerits point system kicks in. There's a need to monitor the performance, but it's not working well. Take the FEHD. The FEHD sent staff to do site visits and surprise visits, but the Ombudsman found the service quality monitoring unit does few visits over weekends. So the demerit point system should cover the contractor's service quality as an indicator. That way, there will be stronger monitoring. The government can consider having a self-monitoring system for the contractors. Let's also use technology to help monitor contractors' performance. We can do smart cameras, the use of AI, camera analytics to find out the work, the daily conditions of workers so that the contractors can arrange the works properly. In Hong Kong, we have robotics, different kinds of technologies. Let's look at Queen's Hill Estate. There are cleaning robots. To help with the cleaning work, the robots go on patrols. This way, when it's hot outside, the workers don't have to do much outdoor work. So in the future, the government should include self-monitoring as part of the requirements. For contractors using new technologies, they should get extra points. Then you get healthy competition and people will get better services from contractors. When contractors fall short, the government should act more decisively with more effective measures so that these underperforming contractors don't get the contracts. Professor William Wong. I thank Mr. Kingsley Wong for his motion on taking the lead by the government to review the outsourcing system. The outsourcing system is used extensively in public services. It's flexible with non-permanent needs. You can better utilize government resources through this system. But when there's a long-term need for a certain kind of posts, this system may not work so well. On information, communications, and technology, the government needs to set up its own team to do the work. Under the 14th Five-Year Plan, our country is making a great effort in digitalization to create a good digital ecosystem. The policy address this year proposed merging the OGCIO and the Efficiency Office. We will have a digital policy office that will work on digital policy, digital governance. We need to support our country's policy on digitalization. This digital policy office is not enough. We need a team, technical support. We need the development staff. The government used outsourced INT providers. In the past 3 years, we spent $3 billion on that. We used T-contract, hiring many tech workers. We have more than 4,000 workers under T-contract. Government papers show when we look at the service fees, it costs around the same money to hire workers through the T contracts as hiring civil servants. This means using those contracts through the outsourcing system does not save money. Our country is on a digitalization drive. This is to meet social needs. And we have the Digital Policy Office. At this office, we should not have outsourced workers. Let's look at Singapore, GovTech. There are 3,000 staff members. 700 are in internal development staff. They do R&D. GovTech does have outsourced projects, but the internal staff play an active part in the work. They do that so that the expertise, the experience stay within the government. Our Digital Policy Office needs talent. We need people with not just the expertise. We need people with ideas, a thorough grasp of government operations. We need people who can deliver. Contractor staff are professionals indeed. But contractors just want to complete the contract. The contractors are not there to help the government shape the future. In the government's digitalization drive, contractors will come across sensitive information, including those about national security. So, should we really let contractors handle data security? Our INT services extensively employed outsourcing services. We rolled out single projects and they went to contractors. But digitalization is not about a bunch of discrete projects. We need strategic thinking. The outsourcing system is not good enough. The Digital Policy Office needs its own team and talent. The talent is the soul of the drive. We cannot just have contract workers. I support the motion and the amendments. Mr. Dennis Leung. Deputy President, I support Mr. Kingsley Wong's motion and the amendment. If the outsourcing system works, there would be no need for the debate today. If the system is flawed, then why are we using the system? We should look at the industries and the job posts. For some sectors and posts, those companies should not use the outsourcing system. It's a simple problem. The government made a mistake in how it looks at the outsourcing system. The government mistakenly thought outsourcing helps save costs. Outsourcing is about short-term work, rare job posts, highly fluid posts. But things are always changing in the job market. And there are situations when it's a niche kind of post, and in this situation, outsourcing may work. But when you're looking at 9-to-5 work, it doesn't involve specialized expertise. In such cases, outsourcing will backfire. Let's look at cleaning and security guards. We use the outsourcing system. Workers in those sectors don't see their rights fully protected by the law. On the contrary, they are being exploited. First, the workers are underpaid. The wages start at low level. They fail to keep pace with market changes. And under the outsourcing system, the lowest bidder wins. The contractors try to keep the wages as low as possible to secure the government contract. In the end, the front lines, cleaners, and security guards suffer. Their wages fail to keep pace with living costs. The government is creating the poverty. These workers don't get accumulated sick leave. The contract ends with just a single month's notice, the contractor lays off the workers. For workers who would have accumulated 120 sick days, a new contract comes, the balance comes down to zero. And workers don't get long-term contracts, so workers miss out on many benefits. Now, on paid annual leave, outsourced workers don't get to build up the balance. When workers work for more years, they're supposed to be able to get more paid annual leave days. But then the contract lasts 3 years, and then the old contract ends, the new contract comes, the paid annual leave balance does not build up. That does not provide the security for workers. Does the government gain anything from the outsourcing system? Administrative needs is just one factor. Civil servants have to spend time on designing the outsourcing contracts, and they have to work on various stages in the outsourcing tendering exercise. And there are also legal issues involved. That's also work for civil servants who have to spend massive time, effort, resources into the work. Outsourcing also requires monitoring. The contractors do the monitoring, or part of it. The government also monitors the contractors. So there are 2 layers of monitoring, and the government needs to put resources into the monitoring of contractors. Some contractors are not as good as others. The low wages on offer do little to attract talent, but there are rising public expectations of the services. So outsourcing does little to boost service quality. The expenses are rising, but the quality is not improving. Workers' rights are not respected. The government is the Hong Kong's largest employer, so the government should take the lead in ditching outsourcing for posts with long-term needs to safeguard the rights of workers like cleaners. I so submit.
Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Deputy President, I thank Mr. Kingsley Wong for moving the original motion and the amendments moved by 2 members. The Hong Kong SAR government is the largest employer in Hong Kong. Over the years, non-core services are outsourced. Short-term tasks are also outsourced. The 4 major procuring departments include the FEHD, LCSD, housing departments, as well as the government property agency. Frontline cleaning workers or drainage workers, as well as security guards, are outsourced. This can help streamline the civil service establishment and create jobs for the private sector. This can help enhance participation of public service by the private sector and enhance efficiency. Meanwhile, there may be shortcomings in the outsourcing system that needs constant improvement. Now, as a general principle, on the note of taking the lead by the government to review the outsourcing system, one might tend to agree, but we also need to think deeper to see whether it is necessary to cover posts with actual needs to permanent posts so that the government will be directly responsible. I think this idea is biased. It is impractical. For example, how do we define what actual needs mean? Now, if the services are essential, any worker may be taking up tasks based on actual needs. More importantly, if we are to turn outsourced posts into permanent posts that are publicly funded, how do we ensure proper use of public money? Will it unnecessarily cause an expansion of the civil service establishment and more pressure on the public coffers in the long run? If these questions are not answered, I don't think this suggestion would be practical. I don't think we should rush ourselves into any conclusion, or else they may be backfire. Outsourcing is not a means adopted by the government. It is adopted by different sectors. For example, the construction industry have specialized contracts for different service contractors. They can work together and contribute with their experience to enhance efficiency. This will provide flexibility for us to cope with economic changes. This is a well-established mechanism. If we turn the outsourcing system into a direct employment system, it doesn't work. So I am afraid I cannot support the idea of turning posts outsourced to permanent posts. Now, in order to meet the demand for public services, the government should take up the responsibility and reform the civil service so that from policy formulation, implementation, and enforcement, the government will fulfill its responsibility. I agree with Dr. Frankie Yan. And in the amendment, he talked about reviewing the terms of contracts and assessment criteria. There should also be strengthened regulation and monitoring of outsourcing service contracts to protect the interests of workers. Over the years, I've urged the government to make sure that there are sufficient professionals in the civil service. There should be better coordination mechanism to implement infrastructure projects and other public works projects. There should be an enhancement to the level of regulation and monitoring of public works projects. Mr. Ambrose Lam's amendment refers to giving priority to local enterprises which employ local workers and local professionals. I think this is the consensus forged by the government, the labor sector, as well as professionals. However, neither amendments refer to any revision to the phrase posts with actual needs to be converted to permanent posts. I'm afraid I cannot support these two amendments. I thank Mr. Kingsley Wong for moving the motion so that we have an opportunity to discuss this matter. In 2018, the outsourcing system was reformed. Workers had the better benefits. The system has been in place for some time. I think it's time that we conducted another review to further improve the system. Now, in the reform package, gratuity entitlement up to 6% was introduced. As for the technical assessment, from a 3 to 7 ratio, the price to technical score was changed to 50 to enhance labor rights. According to a survey, from 2019, the median income of workers increased from $36.7 2019 to $45.5 and now $55, well above the minimum wage rate. The FTU recently conducted another study revealing a lot of shortcomings of the outsourcing system. Is food for thought for us. For example, there is a problem of oligopoly among several service contractors. They suppress labor wages and undermine service quality in order to save costs. With the gratuity arrangements put in place, some of these operators would dismiss their staff for no reason so as to save costs in paying the gratuity. I think the government should review the outsourcing system again to plug loopholes and address shortcomings. There are 4 major procuring departments. Altogether, they spend $22 billion a year on outsourcing contracts. The government should ensure optimal use of resources to make sure laborers will not be deprived of their rights. Now, in the original motion, there is a suggestion of converting posts with actual needs to permanent posts. The FTU also advocates a publicly funded municipal service agency for the government to directly employ the workers. Now, I have some reservations about that, especially in terms of our long-term financial position, whether this is an affordable option. There are also other details that we can discuss. For cleaners, for example, the median, including security guards, cleaners, and frontline workers, the outsourced workers are earning less than the $14,700 paid to government employees for the same post. Now, if reference is made to the pay scale in the civil service, then at the maximum point of the master pay scale, the pay should be $17,300. This will attract more young people to join these industries and compete with older employees. As a result, because of older workers not being as competitive, they may be phased out. This is a possibility we must consider. The other question is on monitoring. Very often, things go wrong in the monitoring of outsourcing service contracts. A mechanism should be put in place. The government should send the staff to conduct on-site inspections. They should hold meetings with service contractors as well as their employees. According to documentation, only 2 of the 4 procuring departments have monitoring records. In the past year, some 3,000 such meetings were or inspections were held, and yet not one default was identified. One questions whether the monitoring effort is effective. Most outsourced workers are hardworking. Still, there is black sheep of the family. The media from time to time reports on the shirkers. Now, improvements should be put in place. The government should conduct a comprehensive review of the outsourcing system to plug loopholes and address shortcomings to make sure that the system will not be undermined by the black sheep of the family. Mr. Lam Chun Sing. Thank you, Mr. President. I thank Mr. Kingsley Wong for moving the motion. I support a comprehensive review to be conducted by the government to see whether any posts should come under direct employment of the government. For example, on tree maintenance and tree safety. For other jobs that must be outsourced, the tendering mechanism should be improved so that we no longer have the lowest bidder wins phenomenon to improve the occupational safety and health. After 2 rounds of arrangements to improve employment benefits for grassroots workers in 2019 and 2021, the labor rights have seen better safeguards. But in terms of wages, there is still room for improvement. The Financial Services and the Treasury Bureau conducted a review on the outsourcing arrangement in the beginning of this year. One of the requirements is that when placing a bid, the service contractor must follow the heat stroke prevention work plan or guidelines promulgated by the Labor Department in this regard. However, as reported by the media, the service contractor did not arrange for rest break for their workers. For some portable fans, their batteries would run out very soon. Workers did not have sufficient rest time. We want to make sure that this heat stroke prevention work plan is effective. Other employers should follow the guidelines as well. This is just a basic requirement. The government should further increase the OSH weighting in the tender process to encourage service contractors to improve OSH. In terms of technical score, out of 100, at least 5 marks will be accorded to the previous demerit points incurred by the bidder. Now, are 5 marks sufficient? The government should conduct a review. If need be, this weighting should be further increased so that the service contractors with poor OSH records will not win the bid. Apart from that, we can provide a carrot and stick strategy. Service contractors most of the time follow the tender brief's requirements. We can encourage service contractors to put in place measures that fare better than the tender documents, conditions, and incentives can be provided. For example, in the next bidding exercise, these tenderers will have a higher chance of winning the bid so as to further enhance OSH for the employees. A few years ago, the government decided not to legislate on standard working hours. A tripartite meeting was set up to discuss the guidelines on standard working hours. To no avail. To tackle the problem of long working hours, the government can include clauses in the tender exercise so that those working overtime can get reasonable compensation. At present, grassroots workers don't always work overtime, so the money involved is not large. The government can take the lead to address issues of fatigue at work and not getting sufficient compensation from overtime work. Now, we're talking about the underprivileged group of workers. They don't have any bargaining power. The Chief Executive's 2023 policy address referred to improving labor rights and reviewing the system. The Financial Services and the Bureau and the Treasury conducted a review on the outsourcing system this year. I hope this is just a start. Within the CE's term, more should be done to roll out policies in enhancing labor rights. I so submit. I support the motion.
Mr. Kong, President, I speak in support of the motion of Mr. Kingsley Wong. In 1992, the government set up a group to execute the relevant outsourcing work, that is the efficiency office. And one of the duties of the office is to introduce outsourced workers. LCSD, FEHD, Housing Department, and Government Property Agency employ over 20,000 non-skilled outsourced workers. Over the years, there are different shortcomings to the outsourcing system. Some of the contractors breached the rules, and there are also labor incidents and occupational incidents. This undermines the quality of outsourced workers, and this also undermines the OSH rights and benefits of outsourced workers. For instance, workers who share similar responsibilities. They are some of the workers who share the same duties, but they earn higher income. Also, contractors, through different ways, avoid paying MPF to workers, undermining the rights and benefits of workers. Outsourcing staff was originally aimed at improving productivity and efficiency, but at the end of the day, some of the underprivileged workers, including the elderly people, were undermined of their rights or deprived of their rights. A lot of them do not have very high education qualification. Also, a lot of them are over 65 years of age. They cannot negotiate the salary or wages with their employers. If we allow these people to get low income, then we are helping the contractors to deprive them of their rights. In some countries, they allow the civil servants to take up some of their posts. Also, we have to review the lowest bidder wins system, because this will undermine the remuneration of workers. We have to review the performance of contractors. Outsourcing the work has its shortcomings, and it makes a lot of civil servants lack. Outsourced workers a lot of time takes up the grassroots work or the lower post or junior post. If the government has the habit of just spending money to deal with these jobs or work, then the civil servants may not feel responsible. And they may end up over-relying on outsourced contractors. And this will create a gap between members of the public and the government. The government lacks the knowledge about the grassroots people, and how will the government be able to protect the rights and benefits of the members of the public, it's time for the government to review the outsourcing system. When we set KPIs, we don't just look at the money we spend, we also look at efficiency and transparency. We have to review the outsourcing system and not over-rely on the outsourcing system or outsourced workers. The government should review the shortcomings of the outsourcing system and give full play to the outsourcing system to effectively protect the labor rights and the underprivileged, so as not to fall short of the expectation of the public. I so submit. Thank you. Mr. Tony Che. Thank you, President. The surveying and architectural sector all along supports the procurement system of the government. Back in 2012, I first joined the election of the Legislative Council, and the government at that time reviewed the relevant system. In this term of the Legislative Council, I proposed a motion to review the procurement and outsourcing system of the government. That includes the outsourcing services. I proposed reducing the weighting of lowest bidder wins and enhance the chance of getting innovative services. And also, the government should support SMEs, and the motion was passed with the support of different members. According to Mr. Kingsley Wong's motion, well, I have reservation on some of the parts of his motion. The motion proposed to review the outsourcing system and converting posts with actual needs to permanent posts. I think there are problems with this proposal. If we are to convert all the posts with actual needs to permanent posts, and then we are not just reviewing the outsourcing system. We will end up canceling the entire system. Compared to a long-term hiring system, outsourcing system is flexible and it allows work to be done more efficiently. And we can, through this system, introduce innovative ideas and more practically gain knowledge about the market. If we cancel the outsourcing system and turn all the posts into permanent posts, then all the services will be provided by civil servants, and this will add the burden to the public finances. And this will also affect the efficiency of public services. And this will be contrary to what President Xi mentioned about working with high or efficient market. Some of the services will have to be provided by outsourced workers. For instance, in the construction sector or in the sector I represent, a lot of the services are provided through outsourcing system. If we get rid of contractors and subcontractors and turn all the professionals posts into permanent posts and ask civil servants to take up these jobs, we will soon be exhausting our $600 billion of fiscal reserve. For large-scale infrastructure projects such as the Khao Yichao projects and Northern Metropolis, they will be severely delayed. The original motion mentions that employees should be remunerated by public funds so that family and these workers can lead a decent life. I agree that employers and employees should earn a reasonable income. But it's not the case that if these employees cannot become civil servants, they won't be able to lead a decent life. I think what matters is that we should enhance the outsourcing system and to do a good job in monitoring the contractors. Therefore, I myself and other members of G19 do not object to reviewing the outsourcing system. This includes ensuring employees, that is outsourced workers, enjoy reasonable remuneration. The two amendments proposed did not amend the wording of the original motion. That's why I won't support the two amendments either. Mr. Chao Xiu-chung, President, The original purpose of rolling the outsourcing system by the government is to provide quality public services. However, it is of no avail. Over the past 20 years, we hear a lot of cases about contractors falling short of the expectation of providing good services. We also hear a lot of cases of workers being exploited. On quality of services, a lot of the cleaning services of the government are provided by contractors. However, there are lots of complaints from the public about the cleanliness of streets. Some of the groups last year did a survey on the cleanliness of Kwun Tong district, and over half of the respondents said they are not happy with the cleanliness of the district. Another survey conducted in Wan Chai district showed similar results. The satisfaction level of respondents show or reflect the quality of services. There are penalty system in place rolled out by the government, but it's not effective in terms of tackling the quality of services, and therefore contractors do not have incentives to enhance the quality of their services. Also, on the remuneration of outsourced workers, the government often says the hourly wage of outsourced workers is higher than the market rate. Well, it's true that the committed median hourly wage of outsourced workers is $55. However, half of the security guards' committed medianly hourly wage is $48 to $49.9. And this is lower than the $2,000 of monthly income earned by other security guards. Some of the workers are given heavy workload and were asked to work overtime, and this is common in the market. Also, a lot of outsourced workers have their contracts terminated because of the contractor's poor performance. The government stresses that the main point is not to reduce expenditure. However, we see that the services provided by contractors fall short of expectation, and outsourced workers' rights are not protected properly. Therefore, the government should review the outsourcing system. In the long run, for some of the long-term municipal services, they should be converted from outsourced posts to permanent posts, so that public funds can be used more effectively. In the short run, the government should continue to enhance the outsourcing system. I have two recommendations. First, the government should set up a platform to calculate the wages of outsourced workers in a standardized approach. The government used to ask contractors to provide the years of experience of outsourced workers, so that outsourced workers won't lose the benefits of statutory or cumulative annual leave. The government should take up the responsibility of protecting the remuneration of outsourced workers and ensure that contractors give the annual leave the outsourced workers are entitled to the workers. Also, if contractors breach OSH-related legislations and breached other rules, the government should deduct the points and prohibit them from taking part in the bidding of projects. Also, technical scores should enhance its weighting from 50 to 50%. Also, the system should be linked to the performance of contractors. I'm glad to hear that the Secretary for Labor and Welfare says that the technical assessment weighting will account for 30% of the entire assessment. That way, contractors that put importance to OSH will be able to win the bid. Thank you.
Mr. Peter Shiu, oppose the original motion and all the amendments. Well, it's not because I don't want to share the fruits of our economic development with the public, but rather I'm against asking the government to reform the outsourcing system and converting posts of actual needs to permanent posts. Now, according to the research division of the LegCo, now it's long been a practice for the private sector to be involved in providing public services. At the time, the focus was on economic benefits and ensuring service quality. And then the government, under its established policy, allowed the private sector to provide services as far as possible. This is to meet certain objectives. First, we want to keep a small and effective government. B, we want to control the civil service establishment. C, we want to create business and job opportunities in the private sector. Now, the Secretariat's research report shows that outsourcing system is adopted by many advanced economies. Now, and then the motion is asking for the government to hire these workers on permanent terms. It's going against the global trend, and that will means government expenditure may rise substantially. But then service quality may be below that for private services. Because government civil service jobs are iron rice bowls, the so-called, and this term government is now considering ways to improve the quality of civil service. We know that we have outsourcing posts, and for years. There have been measures to change amend the outsourcing system. Now, some say that the current arrangements for the lowest bid to win, and there's no end of gratuity payment and whatever, but end of contract gratuity payment. But actually, for the FHD, the committed hourly wage is now $56.90. Now, the LCSD, the FHD, the GPA, and the Housing Department are the major procuring departments of outsourcing service, and they account for 65% of all the contract. Charles Siu-chung said that the service quality is poor. Well, under the new mechanism, if outsourced contractors provide poor service now, their future prospects of winning bids will be affected, because it's no longer the lowest bid wins. Mr. Kingsley WONG mentioned that in other countries they have public organizations that hire staff to do the work. For example, Airport Authority. The Airport Authority CEO has an annual salary of $130 million. It's not that he's unremunerated. And we keep expanding this establishment of the civil service. You know, you have to bear in mind we only have a fiscal reserve of $600 billion left. And the financial secretary has already warned that we could expect a higher fiscal deficit. And right now, the hourly wage is $56.90 for FHD contracts. Is much higher than the market rate of $48 or so. So if we want to give more protection to workers, there are ways to give support to workers, even for the working poor. But if you want to change this conventional system, I hope you think twice. For example, in the past, we have office assistants that deliver documents from one company to another, but probably there are no such more posts. Why? Because if we're talking about MSEM and MSMEs, they can't afford to hire a staff member like that. And for some engineering companies, how come they have to outsource some of their electrical, mechanical contracts, for instance? Why? Because if they hire a large staff and they don't have enough work, then they won't be competitive. Our competitiveness is already on the decline. If we want to protect workers, there are ways to do so. But if you want to smash this traditional approach, I hope you'll think twice. Don't forget, we don't have such a large fiscal reserve anymore, so you have to be careful. Mr. Stanley Ng. I speak in support of Mr. Kingsley Wong's original motion. Most members who spoke pointed to the deficiencies of the outsourcing system. For example, service quality is substandard, operating costs are too high, and so the workers' rights and interests and occupation safety are not guaranteed. I think we're all well aware of the shortcomings of the outsourcing system. I think the consensus really is more about asking the government to review the system comprehensively. And then targeted solutions should be worked out to address the issues mentioned. For example, poor service quality, high operating cost, exploitation of workers' pay, and so on. We are all well aware of these deficiencies, but then some members would just draw on a few words in the motion, that is converting posts to permanent posts. And then they try to negate this consensus that we have, which is a pity. We should all devote our effort to monitor the government and make the government improve the system. That's what we should do. I hope when it's time to vote, members will focus on the key points and focus on the key issues that we want to resolve. We can also see that there are deficiencies in the outsourcing system. And one reason is because the contractors, as the intermediary, have exploited workers of the wages that they could have enjoyed otherwise. So we're seeing that the contractors are increasingly exploiting workers. That's why there's the deficiency is really about adding a layer of intermediary. That's the contractor. The benefits and the pay should have gone directly to workers, but then because of the intermediary, which is the contractor, workers' service conditions suffer, and that's why we're receiving complaints all the time. So that's why we need to address the issue. And what we are proposing to do is to set up some form of municipal service organization to provide services more effectively. It won't lead to the ballooning of the civil service establishment. So I hope members will study very carefully the proposal we've put forward. I hope we will stand united and help the government improve the outsourcing system. I so submit. Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. Thank you, President. I speak in support of the original motion and the other amendments. I think Mr. Wong's original motion has made clear that we're just talking about posts of actual needs that should be converted to permanent posts. We're not talking about converting all posts. So members, I hope you will think twice. Now, in the 1990s, there's already in place the outsourcing system. At the time, the government said its primary consideration was effectiveness and or efficiency. And this issue has, has been in place. This system has been in place for over 3 decades, and there are intricate interests involved, and of course any motion like this will lead to controversy. But here we are talking about ensuring workers will be properly protected and there won't be exploitation, or at least less exploitation. But what we see now is the government is indiscriminately outsourcing services. Now, outsourcing is now based on the tendering system. Yes, there have been some enhancement measures, but they are just improvements at best. Now, if you want to rely on market forces forces, is the market healthy? Is there steady development in the market? Or are we already seeing domination or even bid rigging? So we have to, the government needs to follow up on that. Now, apart from domination, there is also the question of zero protection for outsourced workers. Why are we saying that? You know, for workers in particular, grassroots workers, apart from wage, their length of service will give them the most benefit, because with the length of service, they will enjoy increased leave and other payments. But then, you know, for outsourced workers, their length of service reset to 0 upon the expiry of their contract. So they have no contribution left in the MPF account, because every time the length of service reset to 0, then the contributions are offset. This has all along been a problem. The government must tackle it. In fact, the Legislative Secretariat conducted a study in 2017. Supposedly, outsourcing is meant to help make savings for better efficiency. But then outsourced services are still public services, and so if the services are not provided properly, the government will still be taken to task. And that's why the government eventually hires many people to monitor contract services. And such costs account for 40% of the total contract amount. So it's something additional that the government pays. In other words, the government still needs to deploy civil service staff to monitor the work of contractors, and that really goes against the whole philosophy of outsourcing. Now, early this year, the government introduced improvement measures, and we actually interviewed many frontline workers. Almost 40% were not aware of these improved measures. They didn't know that they would enjoy 1.5 times of pay during typhoons, and they should be paid for statutory holidays if they work, and so on. So 40% of the workers were not aware of such improvement measures. Why is that? Is it that contractors deliberately not tell them? And then there are the issue of rate. There's the issue of wages. Some may be paid $50 or so. Seems that it's better than the statutory minimum wage. It's because there's no accrual of their length of service. And so the compensation is paid in hourly wage. Now, for their length of service, probably they should be paid more than $50 because their length of service is reset to 0. So that's why they don't enjoy higher pay. And then there are some contractors make profit not just from the business return, but they exploit workers so they could maximize their profit. If we could resolve these issues, maybe it's still fine to keep the outsourcing system, because there are so many problems that the government must really tackle them.
Mr. Frankie Yik, President, the outsourcing system has been around in the world for many years. It has worked. It's unavoidable in business. In some systems, you have to do outsourcing. This is to ensure businesses can go on. That way, when economic cycles change, businesses don't fall into trouble or have to fold. I was in industries. Factories cannot just keep expanding due to growth in business. When needed, some of the work is outsourced. When a slump comes, the company won't have to lay off many people or fold because the costs keep rising. And for outsourcing firms, they accept the contracts from many different firms. So that's a kind of risk management. Elsewhere in the world, you see outsourcing too. And that's why you have original equipment manufacturers or human resources agencies. They help provide manpower for different firms across industries to keep working. So the outsourcing system is not something we should try to stamp out. We understand the concerns from trade unions. A small number of people may be using the outsourcing system to exploit workers. We're now talking about ESG, environmental, social, and governance. If a firm falls short of the basic requirements of ESG, this firm will struggle to survive, so we shouldn't worry too much about such firms. The motion today is on taking the lead by the government to review the outsourcing system. The government has indeed reviewed the system from time to time. On April 1st, 2019, the government launched enhancement for the labor rights of non-skilled workers under the outsourcing system. The Labor and Welfare Bureau conducted a review in 2020. The Bureau looked at the success of the enhancement. One area that stands out is wage growth for workers. Government figures show when you compare the before and after the measures, the hourly wage rose by 49.9%. Composite price index A rose by just 5.5%. So that's 8 times the difference we're looking at. In the 2022 policy address, the chief executive proposed review of the hiring of non-skilled workers for government services. It covers pay and conditions. On the 8th of May 2023, there was a joint panel meeting at LegCo. A paper was submitted. The paper sets out the enhancements in detail. This shows the government sets great store by the pay conditions and labor rights for outsourced workers. We see government review results have been shown. Mr. Kingsley Wong's motion appears to be an attempt to turn outsourced posts into permanent posts. The outsourcing system is adopted elsewhere in the world. It has worked. The Liberal Party supports the system. The SAR government has also reviewed the system from time to time. So the Liberal Party will not support the motion or the amendments. I so submit. Dr. Junius Ho. President, I support Mr. Kingsley Wong's motion. The government should take the lead in considering a review of the outsourcing system. We're not talking about the merits of the outsourcing system. There are pros and cons with every system. The system offers flexibility. You can adapt to situations with the system, and it helps lower costs. These are valid points. We have more than 100,000 civil servants. How many outsourced workers do we have? How many outsourced workers are doing what civil servants do? There are different meanings when we talk about outsourced workers. Some work is done by the hospital authority. That's a huge form of outsourcing. Outsourcing healthcare, we have the hospital authority. There are pros and cons. There were arguments that it's better to leave these measures to professionals. So that system is separate from the bureaucratic system. But after a while, the hospital authority becomes its own domain. It has total control over its budget. But in the end, the government is at the back. So we already see the flaw with this system, where the hospital authority has a mandate, but it has autonomy. Or let's look at the airport authority. Look at the third runway. The airport authority raises the money, no public money involved. a public body serving a public purpose, and that's a good thing. The discussion today is about having a full picture, how many civil servants we have. And we also have outsourced workers. Are we going to see outsourced workers doing more of the work than civil servants? I want to take this opportunity to raise a point. When a system has been running for a long time, flaws come up. You have to keep fine-tuning the system. Otherwise, you get fragmentation and silos come up. Look at the FEHD. What's the extent of outsourcing? Mr. Holden Chow raised a question. The question has to do with the number of workers, the pay differences, etc. I don't have the figures at hand, but I know it's a huge number. Outsourcing offers flexibility. The department can manage manpower with flexibility. Is that true? Retired civil servants go to these departments and they get the jobs. And then exploitation happens at the intermediary level. But the front line, those at the bottom, suffer. So we need to work on the outsourcing system. We should not have exploitation happening at the intermediate level. We cannot simply scrap the idea either. So I fully support this motion. We should think about this. I so submit. Thank you. Mr. Michael Lok. Thank you, President. I support Mr. Kingsley Wong's motion and amendments. In 2017, I moved the same motion. It's about reviewing the government's outsourcing system. That's our motion debate back then. In 2019 and 21, the government launched enhancements. To a certain extent, those measures helped address issues like the lowest bidder wins. There were contractors docking the severance pay, and that led to movement. I took part in some of these matters. Should we just stop where we are? I can see there are concerns. Members want to see labor rights safeguarded. One concern has to do with a point in the motion, converting posts with actual needs to permanent posts. Is this a good way to use public money? Will that lead to better service? Let's keep an open mind. We should think about this. I can think of different issues. Last year, during COVID, we had a change to the labor laws. You don't need a doctor's note to get leave for catching COVID. But there was a gap in the law. The government urged employers to let their employees have leave if they see a positive test result with a rapid antigen test. But many contractors refused to grant sick leave because that wasn't required under the law. And then we filed complaints. And then those contractors, acting with great reluctance, granted sick days. Some workers did not get their contracts renewed after complaining about this. And one company is a major service provider of government services. It's a listed company. The more a company saves, the more profit it makes. The company doesn't care much about the worker. As long as they don't get a flood of complaints, the contractor doesn't care all that much. The management costs are high for the government. Dr. C.K. Law, the previous Secretary for Labor and Welfare, acknowledged there are extra costs. And then you also get the cost about getting the civil servants to manage the outsourcing contract. And then you have the tender and exercise, management costs, monitoring costs. Is that cost effectiveness? There are large and small contractors. They see little incentive to use new technology. They want to save money. That's for the smaller contractors. Not all firms are agile. For companies providing estate services, community services, they have little flexibility in deploying manpower. If we can have a non-profit public body to hire the workers on a long term, on a permanent term, then we can safeguard labor rights, because this body is not for making profits, it's there to serve the public. And then we can have maximum benefit. I hope members can have an open mind about this issue. We're not asking for all these posts to be turned into civil service posts. We're not calling for the full scrapping of outsourcing. We can do a pilot in some district. For some services, let's try out Mr. Kingsley Wong's proposal. We will see if we're saving money and getting better services. And then we try it out one step at a time, roll it out across the territory. Will that work better? I so submit.
Mr. Michael Lee. Thank you, Mr. President. Today we are debating on the outsourcing system of the government. Now, I think the crux of the matter is the definition of actual needs. Where should the line be drawn? Without a clear definition of posts with actual needs, it is problematic. Now, some members suggest improving the outsourcing system in such a manner so as to bring more income for grassroots workers so that they get paid more for working less. Of course, it's a happy ending. However, the outsourcing system provides more competitiveness and greater efficiency comparing to the civil service. So I think the focus of this discussion should be like this. If we want to improve services and labor rights, we should discuss improvements to the tender system, because higher income doesn't mean better services. As we all know, the government usually takes the lead. It's a bellwether for the business sector. If we allow this misconception to continue, such that by improving the outsourcing system we can address all shortcomings, there won't be any shirkers, people will get higher pay for less work, then that's not the solution. We have rodents, we have mosquitoes, we have different kinds of infestation. Now it's bed bugs, so problems will always exist. Let's imagine if we give an overhaul to the outsourcing system, the efficiency will be undermined, and in the end, who would be footing the bill? Of course, it's the public, the SMEs. For an SME office with an office space of 200 square feet, do you imagine hiring a full-time cleaner to work for the whole day? Because they usually hire contract cleaners just to take out rubbish, etc., for 20 minutes. Now, the other suggestion is to set up a public body to hire these employees. Like Mr. Peter Shiu said, very often such an organization may be self-financing, like the Hong Kong Airport Authority, and this is one kind of outsourced services. Now, the Hong Kong Airport Authority is one of the best in the world in managing airports. So we should carefully consider any major change to the outsourcing system and the implications. In fact, I am interested in knowing more about the outsourcing system. I know that the government has been making improvements in terms of basic essential services such as cleaning, security guards. There is a cap on the number of working hours a day. There is also an undertaking on the income range. Conditions are put in place before contracts are awarded. And there is a mechanism for us to monitor whether the service contractors are abiding by these conditions. Service quality is our focus, not anything else. Finally, we must make sure that any change will not affect the SME's business environment. The fact is, the outsourcing system helps SMEs grow. Like SF Express, it started with a very small courier business. Now it has become a global logistics chain. It started from providing outsourced services. Thank you. Mr. Bill Tang. Thank you. I first thank Mr. Kingsley Wong for moving this motion. It is a very big topic. Outsourcing system is key to public administration. That is the relationship between the market and the government, whether we can rely on market forces to improve government services, and also whether anyone stand to benefit in the process, be it the employee or the members of the public receiving the service. Mr. Kingsley Wong referred to a lose-lose situation. Now, outsourcing municipal services will in the end cause different parties to lose. The government cannot save costs. And like Dr. Junius Ho said, in the end, only the service contractor wins, especially those at the intermediary level. Well, we always talk about the examples in the mainland and in Europe. They have been advocating automation of municipal services, but this is not happening in Hong Kong because of the outsourcing system. The lowest bidder wins, like Mr. Michael Look said. These private service contractors will not out of the blue procure state-of-the-art equipment and devices to help improve services unless they face complaints. So there is a lack of motive, a lack of incentive for them to do so. The other criticism is if we make this change, older employees will be sacked. But let me ask this question the other way round. These service contractors employ older employees to avoid paying the 5% mandatory MPF contribution. It's all about business acumen. Well, if we're talking a gross profit of 10 to 15%, then if I employ older employees, I don't need to pay for MPF contribution, and that is an incentive. It's a cost-saving measure. That is why we need to ask ourselves, is this the perfect market? Take MPF as an example. What is our view on MPF is privately run. There are 13 trustees, and they don't enjoy as good an acclaim. Well, MPF is a private a system in the private sector. But many people say that we should rather peg our investment to the exchange fund. Now, for FEHD and LCSD, usually 3 to 5 service operators would take up 80% of the contract sum and these are listed companies. So is it like the other member said that SMEs are involved, or is it that we have a situation of market dominance? And are these members condoning market dominance? Like Dr. Junius Ho said, perhaps we can oil the wheels and make sure the mechanism is working well. Be it the Guangzhou example or the different places in the UK experimenting with different models, we need to focus ourselves on the outcome. Like Mr. Kingsley Wong said, the 3 parties lose, ultimately only 1 party wins. That is, the service contractor wins, and service quality, costs, everything else are compromised. So to safeguard the quality of public service, we should review the system. Perhaps we can review whether permanent posts should be set up under the government. Now, I'd like to address another point. For the construction industry, I don't think that the government should take up the project on its own. It's such a colossal project. But at the same time, I'm sure that professionals in the civil service are faring as well as other professionals in the private sector. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Kingsley Wong, you may now speak on the amendments. Thank you, President. Dr. Frankie Ngan and Mr. Ambrose Lam have moved amendments to my original motion. I welcome their amendments to help plug the gaps in mine. It is agreed that the government should set a good example by taking the lead to review and reform the outsourcing system. Some posts with actual needs should be converted to permanent posts so that employees can earn a reasonable income and lead a decent life with their families. Now, the core to the government's review of the outsourcing system is to share the fruits of development. I hope that this can be the consensus in this council as well. As to how this can be implemented, should a public body be set up or otherwise, members have provided diverse views just now. I hope that the government will consider these invaluable views. Dr. Frankie Ngan refers in his amendment to assessing or reviewing the terms of contracts and assessment criteria for awarding the contracts, strengthening regulation monitoring to further protect the legitimate rights and benefits of workers. I fully agree with this suggestion. Some service contractors on a regular basis breach the relevant labor laws and the contract terms. There are different ways for the service contractors to avoid paying the relevant payments, such as the gratuity payment. The FTU once received a case from a housing estate cleaner. The service contractor attempted to dock the pay of 200 security guards and cleaners by 1,000 so that the service contractor could avoid paying gratuity up to $300,000. About another amendment to protect outsourced workers. Well, take the Guangzhou example. In recent years, innovative measures were rolled out. For those working as an outsourced worker for 2 years, benefits will be given to their children, and concessionary rent will be provided. There will also be rest lounges and equipment rooms for workers. I also support Mr. Ambrose Lam's amendment. The FTU advocates according priority to local employees. More support should be given to SMEs. To enhance the competitiveness of employees, we should deploy information technology and enhance training. Now, with rapid advancements of technology, let's take a look at what happens in Hong Kong. Now, our local cleaners are using brooms to sweep the street, but on the mainland, they are using automated processes so as to streamline the procedure, cut costs, and save manpower. That shows the differences between the mainland system and the outsourcing system in Hong Kong. I so submit I support Dr. Frank Ng and Mr. Ambrose Lam's amendments.
Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury. President, I thank again Mr. Kingsley WONG for the motion, Mr. Ambrose Lam and Mr. Frank Ng for the amendments, as well as the 20 members who have spoken on the motion for their valuable comments. I'll give a consolidated response here. Members propose to review the outsourcing arrangements by converting positions with actual needs into permanent appointments. As mentioned in my opening speech, outsourcing is only one of the ways of providing public services. It is up to the departments to decide on the mode of service delivery in light of their operational needs. Generally speaking, the private sector has more flexibility in terms of personnel management and resource deployment, and the government can tap the expertise of outsourced contractors. Departments may, after taking into account their operational needs, the nature of services, cost effectiveness, service quality and efficiency, etc., choose to outsource services to capitalize on the positive effects of procurement so that departments can focus on their own core duties. Like members, I'm very concerned about and attach great importance to the remuneration rights and interests of non-skilled workers employed under outsourced service contracts. Back in 2017, the Labour and Welfare Bureau, in collaboration with the relevant bureaus and departments, conducted a review on enhancing labour protection for outsourced workers. Since April 2019, a series of enhancement measures have been rolled out, including the adjustment of the technical assessment weighting under the marking scheme, the granting to non-skilled workers employed under a continuous contract for a period of not less than 12 months upon the expiry or termination of their contracts, a gratuity of 6% of the total wages earned in the relevant period, except for those who have been dismissed summarily. Also, non-skilled workers employed under a continuous contract for not less than 1 month are entitled to statutory holiday pay. In 2020, LWB reviewed again the effectiveness of the enhancement measures. In his policy address last year, the chief executive announced that the government would further review the arrangements for employing non-skilled staff in government service contracts, including staff remuneration packages and the relevant monitoring mechanism. The FSTB, in conjunction with the Labour and Welfare Bureau, the Labour Department, and the 4 major procuring departments, which are FEHD, LCSD, GPA, the Government Property Agency, and the Housing Department, the Government, the Logistics Department, and the Census and Statistics Department have completed the relevant review. I gave a briefing at the LegCo this May, proposing 4 areas of enhancement as follows. 1. Enhancing in gratuity entitlement for non-skilled workers employed by government service contractors with less than 1 year of continuous service, but whose employment contracts have been terminated either because they are no longer required by the government or because of the contractor's unsatisfactory performance. They will be entitled to a gratuity at 6% of the total wages earned. The eligibility for gratuity will be extended to the supervisory staff of the non-skilled workers employed under government service contracts. Second, enhancing technical assessment of measures or arrangements on improvement to environmental protection, social responsibility, and governance. We're assigning at least 5% from the existing 20% pro-innovation weighting to enhance our technical assessment of measures or arrangements that will improve environmental protection, sustainability, or governance or social responsibility, notably the employment of people with disabilities or rehabilitated persons. 3. Further enhancing the government procurement regime with respect to the occupational safety and health of non-skilled workers. For all government service contracts that involve non-skilled workers performing duties outdoors, in indoor environment without air conditioning, and or in the vicinity of heat sources, tenders are required to provide a heat stroke prevention work plan. We also have a demerit point system, which will be expanded to cover non-compliances with the heat stroke prevention work plan to ensure that the said work plan will be effectively implemented. We have the marking scheme, which will adopt a mandatory assessment of the adverse record of the tenderer in respect of the demerit points accrued in the past 3 years to increase the deterrence effect and achieve better effectiveness in enhancing the labor protection of non-skilled workers. For strengthening the monitoring framework of non-skilled worker contracts, a standardized monitoring framework with guiding principles will apply to all procuring departments that engage non-skilled workers for increasing the control and monitoring of government service contracts. Government departments may outsource services in view of operational needs and other factors, but they must take up the responsibility of monitoring contractors. We have put in place a debarment mechanism and a demerit point system to monitor and penalize non-compliant contractors. Under the debarment mechanism, if a service contractor has committed a specified offense relating to the employee's rights and benefits, its tender submissions within a maximum period of 5 years from the date of conviction will not be considered by the government. Under the demerit point system, if a service contractor fails to fulfill the specified contractual obligations in the contract, such as payment of wages and maximum daily working hours of staff, 1 point will be deducted by the procuring department for each contravention. If a service contractor is deducted 3 points or more within 3 years, none of his tender submissions will be considered by the government for the next 5 years. We're concerned whether contractors would open subsidiaries for continuing to take part in tendering exercises and evade monitoring. For this reason, procuring departments will require tenderers to complete a declaration form to ensure that the outsourced service contractor submitting the tender has no relevant conviction records. If a bidder is partners or shareholders, has or have been convicted of the specified offenses during the debarment period, the tender of that bidder will not be considered. To verify the truthfulness of the declaration, the procuring departments will check the conviction records of the bidder as partners or shareholders for each tender. As mentioned just now, the government has enhanced the monitoring framework since this May by stepping up the frequency of on-site monitoring. Procuring departments are also required to reach out to non-skilled workers to let them know the rights they are entitled to. From 2021 to this September, the Labor Department has conducted nearly 2,700 workplace inspections in respect of government contractors. It has also met individually with 9,000 employees of government contractors to ensure that the employment rights and benefits of these employees are protected. If we find that there are any irregularities or non-compliances, well, as can be seen from a lot of statistics, we have done a lot of prosecutions. Since 2018, we have prosecuted some 30 contractors. As at September this year, some contractors have violated OSH relevant legislations or employment compensation ordinance, and they were fined. These statistics show that in terms of monitoring and prosecution, we have been effective. Also, some members mentioned about the lowest bid wins principle. I want to emphasize that the government does not select service contractors on the basis of the lowest bid wins principle. Starting from April 2019, the weighting of the technical score in the marking scheme for procuring government service contracts has been increased from 50% to 70%, while the weighting of the price score has been correspondingly adjusted downwards from 30% to 50%. In other words, the price score will not be higher than the technical score. The comparison of the weightings of the technical score and the price score proves that the government's current procurement service contracts are definitely not and cannot be awarded to the lowest bidder. That is, a low bid alone is not enough to win a tender. The new tender scoring system puts more emphasis on the technical score, in which the weighting of wage level must not account for less than 25% of the total technical score. Therefore, bidders cannot win a contract by lowering the labor's wage rate. Apart from looking at the wages of employees, we have to look at their working hours as well. According to our current scoring system, the maximum working hours every day is an important part to our assessment. From October 2020 to this September 2022, the maximum working hours is about 8 to 10.75 hours. For security guards contract, it's 8 to 10.5 hours. The maximum working hours is just the maximum. It doesn't represent the number of working hours that the outsourced workers has to work every day. We've set a standard and it's complicated. Currently, we follow a procurement mechanism as well as we look at the market-driven factors. All these factors has implications. As a matter of fact, since April 2019, the measures we've implemented have yielded results. The median committed hourly wage of non-skilled staff employed under government service contracts has increased by about 50% cumulatively, and it's about 19% higher than the market rate and 37.5% higher than the minimum wage. We consider the current arrangement appropriate. Some members suggested establishing an organization dedicated to the employment and management of non-skilled staff. We need to strike a balance between the pros and cons of various aspects and consider whether the proposal can be beneficial to all, including the remuneration and appointment of non-skilled staff, the effectiveness of the implementation of public services, the operation of departments, the overall situation of the labor market, as well as public finance. As mentioned after, the government conducted reviews on the remuneration packages of non-skilled workers and monitoring work and implemented a series of improvement measures that has been a continuous positive impact on the remuneration packages of non-skilled workers and the protection of their rights and benefits. We have to strike a balance between the employment of non-skilled staff, the use of public funds, and the effective delivery of public services. Lastly, I'd like to respond to member suggestions on giving priority to local enterprises, especially SMEs, when outsourcing. The government's procurement policy is to ensure fair, open, and competitive procedures and adhere to the principles of the Agreement on Government Procurement of the World Trade Organization, to treat local and non-local supplies equally and encourage more bidders to take part in tendering exercise with a view to obtaining value for money, goods, and services for the implementation of government programs and work. To increase the opportunities and startups to take part in government tenders, the government has introduced measures to encourage competition and lower the entry thresholds by requiring departments not to list bidders' experience as a mandatory requirement for procurement, and that the experience requirement should not be given more than 15% weighting in the technical assessment. Since the implementation of the above measures in April 2019, about 98% of the procurement of government goods and services have not included tenders' experience as an essential requirement. The government has also reduced or waived the requirement for tender and contract deposits to ease the burden of prospective bidders in the procurement process. There is a need for procuring departments to split large contracts as far as possible to increase the opportunities for SMEs and startups to take part in government tenders. At the same time, procuring departments should simplify tender documents as far as possible and where appropriate exercise flexibility in the payment terms of goods or service contracts and make payments by phases as far as possible to alleviate the cash flow pressure on SME contractors. The Government Logistics Department has been updating its web page on the procurement plans of various departments for goods and general services on a monthly basis to allow enterprises to keep abreast of the latest developments in government procurement. For instance, The shares of local and mainland contractors and local consultancy firms in the procurement of public works projects by the Development Bureau in the past 3 financial years were about 80% of the total amount, respectively. Some members mentioned about whether we are concentrating on a particular few contractors, as said. December 2022 for non-skilled workers contractors, including cleaner, as well as other types of workers, the number was 270. 54 contractors. For the top 5 contractors that want the most most projects, only account for about 60% of the total number of contractors. So we don't see the problem with the lack of competitiveness as mentioned by some of the members. Lastly, I'd like to thank members for proposing the motion and for the frank exchanges today.
I now call upon Dr. Frank Ngan to move an amendment. President, I move my amendment. I propose a question to you that Dr. Ngan Menyu's amendment be passed. Mr. Tommy Cheung claims division. The bell will ring for 5 minutes. Members, please proceed to vote. Members, please check your votes. If there are no queries, voting will now stop and the results will be displayed. From Election Committee, 37 present, 25 for, 1 against, 11 abstentions. From FCs, 48 present, 29 for, 3 against, 15 abstentions. The question is agreed by a majority of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the motion passed. Mr. Ari, President, I move that in the event of further divisions being claimed in respect of the motion on taking the lead by the government to review the outsourcing system or any amendments thereto, this Council should proceed immediately after the bell has been rung for 1 minute. I propose a question to you that the motion be passed. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the motion passed. I order that in the event of further divisions being claimed in respect of the motion, this Council will proceed immediately after the bell has been rung for 1 minute. Mr. Ambrose Lam, please move the amendment. I move my further amendment. I propose a question to you that Mr. Ambrose Lam's further amendment be passed. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Mr. Tommy Cheung has claimed the division. The bell will ring for 1 minute. Members, please proceed to vote. Please check your votes. If there are no queries, voting will stop and the results will be displayed. From Election Committees, 36 present, 25 for, 1 against, 10 abstentions. From Functional and Geographical Constituencies, 48 present, 25 for, 3 against, 19 abstentions. The question is agreed by a majority of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the amendment passed. Mr. Kingsley Wong, you have 3 minutes 34 seconds to reply. The debate will come to a close afterwards. Thank you, President. I thank members for moving amendments to my motion and speaking to it. These are invaluable views to help the government review the outsourcing system. I will definitely consider members' views to further advocate review of the outsourcing system. Presidency is very concerned about the interests of frontline grassroots workers. During Chinese New Year, he praised them as beauticians of a city. Without their hard labor, we wouldn't enjoy a very clean urban scape. People would not see improvement in their livelihood. we should all respect our workers. I have very strong feelings about President Xi's remarks. Now, the labor unions also express concern about the poor working environment of cleaners. They do not have any resting room. Despite that, they soldiered on. Even when they are sick, they continue to work. They may not have high education attainment. They may be aged. They may not be eloquent. They may not know about their labor rights or speak out about them. As we enjoy a beautiful and clean Hong Kong, we must bear in mind that this is the work of our frontline workers. In a stable and prosperous society, we should be caring and inclusive. Businessmen should be able to make a profit, and then through hard labor, employees can also earn a decent income and lead a decent life. I understand the political reality. Any motion on improving labor rights in this council will not be passed easily. That is why we are only putting forward 2 humble requests. That is, for posts with actual needs, they should be converted to permanent posts so that employees can receive a reasonable income. We should try our best to set aside our differences and find common ground. We need to do our level best to forge consensus so that our underprivileged grassroots workers can be treated fairly. They have been contributing to our society. Members, please vote and support them so that outsourced workers, like other workers, can lead a decent life and earn a reasonable income, so that the government can implement the principle of people-oriented administration, so that we can uphold President Xi's remark that if you work hard, you can improve the life of your own and your families. I put this question to you. That is Mr. Kingsley Wong's motion as amended by Mr. Dr. Min Yu and Mr. Ambrose Lam be passed. Mr. Tommy Cheung claims the division. The bell will ring for 1 minute. Members, please proceed to vote. Please check your votes. If there are no queries, voting will now stop and the results will be displayed. From ECs, 37 present, 25 for, 1 against, 11 abstentions. From FCs and GCs, 48 present, 25 for, 3 against, 19 abstentions. The question is agreed by a majority of each of the 2 groups of members present. I declare the motion as amended passed. The Council will adjourn until 11 a.m. Wednesday, 22nd of November.